Hello, everybody. Welcome to the February 2024 Big Fix Briefing Room. My name is Michelle.
And I'm Joe Saylor.
And we're going to talk about Microsoft security, like we always do. We have a little bit on Linux security. We will cover some notable exploits. We always touch on the SysAkev updates, and there is a new security update for Big Fix 10. So, Joe, why don't you take it away with the Microsoft security?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So this month is a relatively heavy month for CVEs for Microsoft products. We have 73 total CVEs fixed in the updates for this month. About 122 actual updates were delivered, and that's a normal number because everything is cumulative nowadays. So no matter how many fixes we have, it's always like kind of the same number of updates. So vulnerability-wise, kind of heavy. Number of updates-wise, always the same. The updates cover all of the OSs, of course, everything from 2008 to 2022 on the server side and Windows 10 and 11 for the client side. We have some especially important updates this month for Outlook, Exchange, a sneaky one for ODBC, several Azure updates, and a couple of pretty critical Office ones.
And I'm glad we're recording this one now because that Outlook update, we just had a little bit more information about an exploit there, so this is good timing.
Yeah, totally fresh. Didn't update the deck, but we're going to talk about it anyway.
Yep. All right, so yeah, here we've got the 0 days. Why don't you cover those, Joe?
Yeah, so I'm sure you guys remember the holiday we had last month. There were just absolutely no 0 days, which I'm still just like mind blown by. It had been 3 years since the last time that had happened. So, we really got lucky, but they're back. This month, we've got a couple of 0 days that essentially enable phishing. So there's a vulnerability in the smart screen security feature and the shortcut files security feature bypass. That bypasses the mark of the web warning, which basically means that somebody can craft a file that will send a user wherever they want without any sort of confirmation, which is generally like, anytime you're like clicking on a link, if there's a, hey, this isn't a legitimate site warning, like that's my sign to think twice about it, and you don't get that second thought here. So these are out in the wild. There are files that have been already maliciously crafted and are ready to take over your users. So probably want to get these resolved.
Yeah, definitely above the line. And both of these, I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, would require phishing, right, to be exploited. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, pretty much everybody's favorite social engineering technique is on full display here. So more cybersecurity training, I guess. Like that's the real solution here.
Yeah,
So
I don't think
guys.
it would just really solve that that issue. We've tried training, but we're still hearing organizations struggling with this. So please don't click on anything you're not sure about. What's next? The criticals.
All right. Yep, everybody's favorite. So in addition to our 0 days, we have just a fair few, what I believe are the most important critical updates. And by critical, I mean, 9.0 or above on the CVSS scale. Most of these are 9.8s. So our first one here, the Outlook remote code execution exploit is actually actively exploited as of today. So I guess it's not a 0 day, but like a 1 day. This one is particularly nasty because any message that comes in that's maliciously crafted in the preview pane can trigger it. So if you have Outlook running and you just, are scrolling through your emails and one of them has a maliciously crafted link inside of it, it will just activate this exploit. And there is examples out in the wild of that right now. So, that news just came out like seriously 8 minutes ago. And it sounds really scary to me. So in addition to this being 9.8 and, vicious on its own, it's now actively exploited. So this one is way above the line. So in a kind of similar story on the Exchange server side, there is a, it's really impersonation. They're calling it an elevation of privileges attack, but it's there's a leak on the client side that allows an attacker to essentially steal credentials and then log into your Exchange server with them and do whatever that user could have done. So not a great one. This has not been actively exploited yet. I mean, I guess I haven't checked the internet in the last 6 seconds, so maybe it is. As of right now, not exploited.
Okay, what you're saying is to close that.
Close it.
Yeah.
It's not good. You don't want people logging in, especially with the the Outlook remote code execution exploit. Like the two by their powers combined, if somebody can just sniff a login of a legitimate user and then send out malicious links that are automatically activated, like, boy, that's starting to look really scary. So yeah, way above the line again.
So I see the next one here is a Jira plugin for Entra. What's Entra?
Yeah, so for those of you who are unaware, Microsoft is rebranding Azure Active Directory. You can see the new icons on the right there. They are pretty similar, but it's confusing enough to me that it's not immediately clear what Entra ID was when I was reading through these CVEs. So just get it in your head. Azure is now Entra. Microsoft themselves seems to be a little bit confused by this because half the CVEs are this month are labeled as Azure and a few are labeled as Entra. So get ready for that transition to begin in earnest. So the vulnerability here is for the Jira login plugin for Entra ID. So if you use the single sign-in plugin for your Jira instance, this allows an unauthenticated user to change your authorized tenant, which effectively lets them just log in and do whatever they want with your Jira.
So I know you've got this on the critical list, but if I recall correctly, that one was categorized as important.
Yeah, that's just like a mismatch, I think. So CVSS says this is a 9.8. Microsoft says it's just important, not critical. That's their highest level of importance for an update. And I'm leaning towards CVSS on this one. The way I read this is essentially like any toddler that has a line of sight on your Jira instance, if you're using this plugin, can just own it. They can just take it over if they're near it.
Okay, yeah, I agree with your assessment here to put it as critical.
It sounds very bad. Yeah. So this one again for me would be a patch immediately kind of thing. Even though Microsoft says that it's just an important update.
Okay.
And then our last call out here is for the internet connection sharing remote code execution exploit. This one is the other way around. On the CVSS scale, it's actually only a 7.5, but Microsoft calls it a critical. I'm leaning towards Microsoft on this one. The way this exploit works requires a user to be on the same subnet as a malicious device. So it's not something that like an internet connected attacker could like hit your systems with, or a client system with that's at their like home office, because they just has to be on the same subnet. So location wise, it doesn't seem that bad. But if you think of the way that users really use their laptops, if say they went and logged into a mom and pop coffee shop, who are not well known for having great cybersecurity practices, it could very well be that an attacker maybe like leaves a Raspberry Pi device that's logged into that network and has prepared the ground ahead of time, and now suddenly your company laptop is compromised just because they connected to some unsecured Wi-Fi.
Okay, what I'm taking away from that is definitely close the vulnerability, and also VPN is your friend. Is that fair?
VPN is absolutely your friend. Password secured Wi-Fi is your friend. Like anything to keep your users off of just like wide open Wi-Fi connections. It's been a while, I think, since we've had a vulnerability that really punishes that. And this one brings it right to the fore, that really unsecured Wi-Fi is scary, and it is the wild, wild west. And I think we're back to cybersecurity training. Like we need get your users into knowing how to protect themselves.
Yeah, I agree. Awareness is key. And I know it's a challenge. I don't think anybody has really done that well to solve this. So I'm very curious, and I'm hoping we'll get some comments and feedback on how, some of our customers have figured out how to solve for this awareness challenge.
Yeah, we all do things that are, in retrospect, super risky, but at the time, they don't seem that bad. Like, say, connecting to Wi-Fi when you want to get on the internet and watch some wonderful security related content on YouTube, say.
For sure. What's next? Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I want to introduce this one. If you've been anywhere on the internet in the past few weeks, I'm sure you've heard about Ivanti and Fortinet. And yeah, Joe, I like your headline, The Month That Broke Internet Edge Devices. This was really big news. So what happened is Ivanti and Fortinet, they have these VPN appliances that, sit at the edge. They're internet facing, and they have multiple unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerabilities. It was a big deal. CISA had a couple of advisories about it that weren't even 2 full weeks apart. So I think this is because it got so much news. I think it's important to cover this. Joe, do you want to explain these edge devices and what's going on there?
Yeah. So, the only reason I really wanted to bring this up, the intent is not to like dogpile on the whole situation with Avanti and Fortinet. That's been litigated to death on the internet. So, just Google it. You'll find all sorts of things to talk about. Um, the main reason I really want to talk about this is that I am a huge fan of learning lessons the easy way. And anytime something big and high profile like this happens, I want to learn all the lessons I can from it. So in this case, we have some VPN appliances. Fortinet had a vulnerability in their firewall software as well. And the commonality between all of them is that they are devices that an attacker has easy access to just throw stuff at. So any idiot with a botnet can throw just an unlimited number of attacks and probe the defenses of these devices at any time. And so that really puts like a laser focus on how you need to secure them and how like precarious it is that they're all the way out on the edge like that. If these devices had been um, like server type stuff that's on an easy to secure OS that's generally inside the firewall, like say for us the BigFix root server is typically inside a firewall. There just isn't the access, right? Like you don't have this flood of attacks coming in because, well, geez, first you have to cross the barrier of being inside the network, and these kind of products, these kind of appliances don't have that luxury. They're just out there and exposed. So yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
sorry to interrupt, but so yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, traditionally, the root server for BigFix is behind the firewall, but we do have the ability to have like a fake root that sits outside of the firewall, and then our relays are outside of the firewall because we don't require any connection to, say, Active Directory or Entra, or to be on the VPN. While we accept those connections, we don't require it. So we've got devices that sit out at the edge too. But what you're saying is they're not as vulnerable because they're secured.
Yeah, and the easy lesson to learn here is that for our relays, the ones that are out on the edge and internet facing, every company has people working from home now. And, we've seen a huge rise in the number of relays that we have, BigFix relays that we have pointed out to the internet and are available and, therefore exposed in the same way. And so the thing I really wanted to bring up here is that it's really important to pay attention and make sure those are configured in the way that makes them secure, right? So relay authentication needs to be turned on for those relays. BigFix 11 now has a higher level of enhanced security, which enforces SHA-384 certificates and TLS 1.3. So just a greater cryptographic standard. And all of those things can contribute to protecting yourself from this, flood of attackers that are just out there and, ready to take on internet facing devices.
Yeah, these are all really good points. So for our customers, if you're still on version 10, and you need some advice on how to get upgraded to version 11, we're certainly happy to help you with that. You can check the links in the video description to figure out how to get in touch with us. We're happy to help.
All right. So moving on to some other current news. This one didn't make as big a headlines, but still a little bit. So AnyDesk, the company, had a compromise happen a couple of months ago, somewhere in December. So the application itself has not been compromised, right? So there's no vulnerability in your clients today. The real damage that was done for this compromise internally anyway was that all of the AnyDesk certificates kind of got ruined. So anytime you open up like an executable from AnyDesk that has been signed with their private key, that kind of stuff isn't really trustable anymore. So they've had to revoke all of their certificates. They don't believe there was any compromise on user passwords, but they are forcing user password resets anyway. Which to me is just makes great sense, right? Even if it's not known to have been exfiltrated, just be safe, right? That's what security is.
Yep. It's disruptive though, but we've got content to simplify that.
Yeah. So the great thing about this is we have some sneaky content that I think doesn't get used a lot. It doesn't get a lot of press. We have a update site named Updates for Windows Applications Extended. And that comes with, I believe, lifecycle and compliance. So, most customers will probably have access to this, but may not be subscribed because it's relatively new. It has updates for quite a few applications. We're up to like 250 some odd now, I think. And one of them happens to be AnyDesk. So AnyDesk has released a new version of their application, 8.08, with their new signing key. The existing application, 8.07, 8.06, and below, will not be a trusted application soon. They have not yet completely revoked the certificate for those versions, but they will not be functional fairly soon. So updating to 8.08 with our Fixlet is just a great way to save yourself a bunch of headaches and get safe.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Oh, yes. It looks like a light month for Linux admins.
Yeah. In general, there's nothing very scary for Linux this month. I have just taken a short list of the highest CVSS score updates that are available for Linux this month, and nothing rises over a 7.8. Generally speaking, these are mostly crash vulnerabilities where you could have like a denial of service if somebody already has command line access on your boxes. So nothing too terrible. There is an escalation of privileges to sudo in the huge TLBFS fill super function. That one's, to me, maybe the most serious of them. But for the most part, this is business as usual for Linux. There's no unauthenticated attacker vulnerabilities here.
Well, that's good. Somebody gets a little bit of a break this month. Oh, Sysakev. So briefly about Sysakev, if you don't know about it. CISA is a government agency that tracks all of the known exploited vulnerabilities, and they advise the U.S. federal agencies to close these vulnerabilities as high priority. And so we do keep track of this list for a couple of reasons. Just very quickly, one is that if you're just getting started with vulnerability management and you're not sure what to do first, the Sysakev catalog is a pretty good place to start, because even though it's got 1,077 entries of it as of January 9th, it does cover most of the high priority things that you would want to address. So it's a great place to start. The other thing is that we do have content to discover and resolve the majority of the items on this list. And Joe, you've got a few highlighted there, so I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing to know about the Kev list here is that It's not necessarily vulnerabilities that are super scary and can result in your entire network being destroyed, but they are vulnerabilities that have right now active exploits that are out in the wild. So they're not theoretical. A lot of the theoretical 9.8s sound really bad, but nobody's ever really written code to exploit them, and so they're not as bad as it sounds. These ones all can and will be exploited, right? Like it's not theoretical, and that's why it's an important list. So I've highlighted a few items here. We've already talked about the Avanti ones. Generally speaking, these are the ones that to me are exploits that could result in your whole network dying. Like they're the ones that are like super scary. The one that we haven't talked about yet is the Chromium type confusion vulnerability. This one is another update where another vulnerability where a user clicking on a malicious link can just kind of like instantly lose their system. So, no confirmation, no chance for them to kind of back out of a single misclick. So that update is, to me, one of the most painful here. And that's resolved with just the most recent updates to Chrome and Edge.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've got a patch available. Why don't you tell us about that?
We do. This one's fresh off the presses, just released 7 days ago now. I can't count days. I don't know what days are anymore. Time is an illusion. But it's out now. It is mostly a bug fix and CVE resolution update. We did improve console load times. So any of you guys with larger environments that take 40 minutes to load the console, you'll probably really appreciate this one. In addition to just some normal vulnerability resolution, we have also updated some drivers. We've updated the libcurl library to 8.5.0. This one actually resolves a pretty serious vulnerability in the library that doesn't actually affect BigFix. So maybe the reason you haven't seen a lot of noise around the big critical vulnerability in there for BigFix is that we don't actually use the affected calls. So, for us, it's not as awful, but in an abundance of caution, we're updating it anyway. The ODBC driver update, I kind of alluded to this at the beginning. This one has a issue where if an operator kind of gets tricked into changing the server's ODBC driver to point to a like maliciously crafted URL, then there's a remote code execution exploit. So in general, this is stuff that's like deep in your network and require a user to have, require an attacker to have like really seriously compromised your root server anyway. But again, in an abundance of caution, we've updated this driver so that you don't get hit on any of your security scans.
Yeah, and it looks like we've got some inspectors and agent support now for IBM BIOS. That's new for us, right?
Yep. Yeah, brand new. It's just a flavor of Linux, so it's still very, very similar to everything else. But we now have support for BIOS 3.1.3.
Fantastic. And I think that's all for this month. Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Thanks for viewing if you made it this far. I believe since this is going on YouTube, I am legally required to say, please like, subscribe, and smash that subscribe button as hard as you possibly can. That felt dirty, but again, legally required. Like I had to.
Yeah.
In addition, I'd really like any feedback on content you'd like to see in this space. If you have anything you'd like us to talk about, just kind of going forward, recurring segment ideas, I'd love to hear about it. I believe we'll have a link in the description below this video for your feedback.
That's right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good month.
Thanks.